Welcome to another quiet journey through the forgotten rhythms of the past. Tonight, we travel far north, past the craggy coastlines of Norway, through ancient pine forests dusted in white, and across fjords silenced by ice. Here, in a world without clocks or electricity, life bends to the seasons. And winter. Winter is everything. You won't find thundering longships or battlefield cries in this tale. Instead, this is the story of survival, of wool-wrapped days by the hearth, of cracked hands and preserved meat, of hushed gods watching over snow-laden roofs. You're invited not into a saga of conquest, but into a season of quiet endurance. Let your thoughts settle into the dark stillness of a Viking winter. Let the flicker of firelight dance on the walls of your mind as we begin gently, slowly our descent into the Old North. Now, close your eyes and imagine yourself in a longhouse. The wind bites before it whispers. It's early December, though you wouldn't know the date by any calendar you keep. The sun barely rises before it slips back behind the mountains. Days are short, nights endless, and everything around you is cold, unrelentingly cold. Imagine yourself waking inside a wooden longhouse, its thick timbers sealed with moss and clay. Above you, the rafters are dark with years of soot. Below, the earthen floor is packed and hard beneath your furs. You sleep beside your kin. There is no privacy, no true silence, but it is warm relatively. The fire in the center of the room hasn't gone out in months. It can't. It's fed with care, with hoarded wood, and it bathes the air in thick smoke. The smoke doesn't rise so much as it lingers, curling around your face, seeping into wool and beard and braided hair. There is no chimney, only a hole in the roof, and when snow covers that hole, the longhouse becomes its own kind of weather. Your hands crack from cold. The skin between your knuckles splits from the dryness of the fire and the sting of frost. You rub them with rendered fat, not for luxury, but survival. Moisture is precious. Heat, even more so. Outside, the fjord is frozen solid. The boats have been dragged to shore, flipped on their backs like sleeping beasts. There is no fishing now, no raiding, no travel unless urgent. The winter world is a prison, and its walls are snowdrifts. Food is survival. Nothing is fresh. Everything must be planned. In the early fall, you helped salt fish and dry strips of lamb. You buried root vegetables in the ice pits carved into the hillside. You set aside barrels of ale and bundles of dried herbs. The mead is a comfort, but not freely drunk. Every drop must last until spring. Inside the house, life slows to ritual. You carve wood, sew wool, patch leather. Children play with carved animals, their laughter quiet beneath the crackle of flame. Elders tell stories, sagas of frost giants, clever gods, and ancient honor. The stories fill the night like music. They're not for entertainment alone. They are memory, teaching, hope. The rituals of winter hold everything together. You know what each day requires: the tending of animals, the mending of tools, the checking of stores. Every task has its rhythm, and rhythm means comfort. There is power in repetition. You begin to hum the old songs as you work. You barely notice. And there is fear too. Fear that the stores will run dry, that the goats will give no milk, that a cough will spread through the house, that the snow will not melt soon enough. But you've survived winters before. You know the rhythm. You trust it. You endure. And through it all, the gods are near. You make quiet offerings. Leave a piece of bread for the whites. Say the names of Odin and Thor under your breath. The gods, after all, know what it is to suffer. You sleep early, you wake often, and the world stays still. This, then, is the truth of the Viking winter, not the clash of swords or the call of sails, but a quiet, constant battle with the cold. A season of stillness, of waiting, of breathing frost and hoping for the thaw. As the snow still falls gently outside the Viking longhouse, let us turn our thoughts inward beneath the surface of the world, into the layers of time. Not into the realm of saga or song this time, but into the earth itself, where the past hides patiently. Archaeologists and quiet wanderers across the Nordic lands have, over centuries, uncovered curious remnant stones arranged not by accident, but by intent. Pillars that do not belong to any known dwelling, rings of rock where no home once stood, and burials that whisper of something older. Let your mind drift now to a windswept hill on the island of Gotland. The grass is thin here, and the sky is always restless. Beneath your feet lies the faint outline of a stone ship, large stones laid out in the shape of a vessel, resting in the earth. This is no grave for a body, but perhaps for a journey, a ship for the soul, a ritual for memory. The Viking world, after all, was not just swords and sails. It was belief, it was ceremony, and many of those ceremonies took place not in grand temples, but in sacred spaces outdoors, groves of trees, lakes smooth as mirrors, or rock circles warmed by the solstice sun. We know little of the temples of the old gods, because they were rarely buildings at all. The Norse worshipped through tea offerings made at altars, often of wood, sometimes stone. These altars were places of gathering, of blood and prayer, of quiet chants beneath the stars, and they were often deliberately erased when Christianity spread. But some remains resist forgetting. In Uppsala, Sweden, lies the memory of a great temple once spoken of by Adam of Bremen, a chronicler from the 11th century. He describes it as golden-roofed, surrounded by groves, where statues of Thor, Odin, and Freyr stood tall. Every 9 years, it is said, a great festival was held. Animals, and perhaps men, were sacrificed to honor the gods and ask for peace or plenty. But was this temple real? Or was it colored by the fear of Christian chroniclers? Archaeology offers few answers. The remains of wooden posts have been found. Post holes aligned in sacred geometry, patterns that echo belief systems lost to wind and weather. Perhaps the temple stood, perhaps it never did, but the idea of it still shimmers in the northern dusk. Elsewhere, we find burials with peculiar arrangements, graves with ritual tools, with seeds and stones, with iron amulets shaped like hammers, symbols of Thor, symbols of strength. And sometimes the dead were burned, their ashes mixed with those of animals, as if to bind them to nature itself. The Viking spiritual world was layered, woven between things. There was Midgard, the realm of humans, Asgard, the home of gods, Hel, the quiet underworld. The Yggdrasil tree connected them all, its roots deep in mystery. Every ceremony, every carved stone, echoed that cosmic shape. And so, when you imagine a Viking temple, don't picture a cathedral or a hall. Picture the hush of a pine grove, the hush of frost on bark. Picture hands raising a carved idol from a pouch, a chant spoken slowly in old tongues, a circle of people standing silently, watching smoke rise into the sky. The mystery is not in what we can confirm, but in what still lingers, in what time cannot quite erase. And in the winter, when the land is still and blanketed in white, those echoes grow louder, not with noise but with presence. Imagine now the heavy oak doors of a great hall swinging open. The air is thick with the scent of roasted meat, smoke from the hearth, and sweet mead poured into polished horns. Welcome to the world of the Norse elite, the jarls and petty kings who ruled by sword, word, and tradition. Let us walk quietly into a Viking hall at dusk. The flames of the central fire crackle, their smoke rising toward an opening in the roof. Furs cover the benches. Shields line the walls, each painted, worn, and not merely for show. The long table is set, though not with finery as in later medieval courts. Yet for their time, these were symbols of wealth, wooden platters, brass cups, and salt precious and rare. You would not have been welcome here, not unless you bore a name or allegiance that carried weight. These halls were reserved for the powerful, the jarls, lords who controlled land, loyalty, and lives. Their wealth was measured in cattle, silver, and men sworn to serve them. At the head of the table sits the jarl himself, not a king in the traditional sense, but ruler enough. His tunic is dyed with deep color, possibly imported, perhaps from distant Byzantium or through Frankish merchants. Around his neck, a chain of silver. On his fingers, rings that mark status and gift-giving power. The Viking feast was not simply a meal. It was a display of generosity, of control, of stories told and remembered. Skalds, the poets, would rise to recite epic poems that honored ancestors and victories. Their words wove memory into myth, Every listener sat in hush, the rhythm of the verse as familiar as the beating of the heart's pulse. The elite world also brought rituals of alliance. Marriages, sworn oaths, and land grants often took place here, beneath the timbered beams and watchful eyes of gods carved into wooden idols. Gifting was everything. The Jarl gave gold or weapons to loyal men, and in return, they gave service and, when needed, blood. Let's shift now to a quieter corner of this life, the private chamber of a noblewoman. The wife of a Jarl might hold power of her own, managing the estate in his absence, overseeing slaves, keeping the accounts of trade and stores. Her clothing was fine, wool dyed in blue or green, fastened with brooches of ornate design. Perhaps she wore glass beads strung from Dublin or Kiev, reminders of how far the Viking world stretched. And what of their children? Young boys were taught early the ways of war, the weight of shield and axe. Girls learned craft, song, and the sacredness of lineage. Not all grew up to lead. Some would be married for alliance, others lost to illness or battle, but each bore the mark of status and name known beyond the village, a destiny tied to land and legacy. But it was not always grand. Power could be lonely, betrayal came easily. A feast one year could become a battlefield the next, and the Jarl's hall, warm and alive, might someday fall to fire or silence. Yet, for this moment, imagine the warmth, the steady hum of low voices, the clink of cup against wood, the laughter from a corner, the sense that here, among the elite, stories lived longest. Even now, excavations across Scandinavia uncover longhouses that once held this power. Their posts charred, their floors sunken, but their memory strong. You can almost hear the footsteps echoing across the centuries. And now, as we leave the world of the Northmen behind, the smoky hearths, the salt-stitched air, and the slow creak of wooden ships slicing through frozen fjords, let yourself return gently to the quiet of your room. The stories we wandered through tonight were not of the gods or of conquest, but of something slower, quieter, more human. You've followed the rhythm of a blacksmith's hammer, walked in the muddy steps of a fisherman, listened for the scrape of a pen in a monastery's candlelight. You've stepped into the terror of a storm at sea, and sat at the long table of a Jarl's feast, all while wrapped in the still hush of history. The Norse world was not always raiding or roaring. Often, it was a silent routine, gathering, waiting, enduring. There was peace in its repetition, even as danger loomed beyond the trees or tide. That rhythm, the churn of butter, the shape of a carved prow, the crackling of fire, it echoes across time, unchanged. These were lives lived in rhythm with the seasons, with tides, with stories told over and over until they became truth. So as you drift now, perhaps already half asleep, carry with you a whisper from that world. The warmth of wool, the scent of pine smoke, the hum of distant song. Tomorrow, the world will be noisy again, but tonight, you've wandered far into the past and returned with nothing but calm. Thank you for spending this time in quiet curiosity. Until next time, sleep well.